drove to O'Hare International Airport to surprise the woman he had loved for 16 years, and watched her walk through the arrival's door, holding another man's hand. For 16 years, Marcus had been a loyal husband and devoted structural engineer in Chicago, the kind of man who showed up early and stayed late, who remembered birthdays and kept his word and never once in 16 years gave his wife a reason to doubt him. He had spent 11 of those years building a two-man consulting firm into a 14-person operation with contracts across 4 states. He drove a 2014 Ford F-150 with a long scratch along the rear panel from a rebar incident he never bothered to fix. He carried a thermos. He clipped coupons. He went to bed at 10 and woke up at 5 and asked for nothing except to be believed when he said he loved her. She had been planning this for 8 months. 8 months of whispered calls and deleted texts, and a second phone she kept in the interior pocket of a gym bag he never touched. 8 months of late nights explained as networking events and early flights described as regional conferences. He had nodded at every explanation and believed every word, because that was who Marcus Ellison was. What Dana did not know, what she had never once thought to ask, was that the firm Marcus had built quietly, methodically, without ever announcing its worth, had been acquired 9 weeks earlier for $4.3 million. She had signed divorce papers 48 hours after that closing. She had celebrated her freedom in a hotel room downtown, while Marcus sat in his attorney's office and started building something she would never see coming. What she did not know would cost her everything she thought, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The alarm went off at 5:12 a.m. on the Thursday that changed everything, and Marcus Ellison reached for it without opening his eyes. He dressed in the dark the way he always had. Work boots laced without looking, canvas pants, the Carhartt jacket hanging on the hook by the bedroom door where it had hung every working morning for 9 years. He moved through the kitchen with the precision of a man who had done this so many times the house itself seemed to accommodate him, the refrigerator door swinging open to the exact angle that cleared the counter, the coffee maker already programmed from the night before, the thermos standing ready on the counter to the left of the sink where it always stood. He filled it. Black. No sugar. Screwed the lid tight. Pulled the site notebook from the counter, tucked it into the inside pocket of the Carhartt, and walked out to the driveway. The F-150 was cold. It had been October for 3 days, and Chicago had committed to it the way it always did, completely, without negotiation. Marcus let the engine warm up for 2 full minutes before backing out. His father had taught him that. The engine needs to want to work, his father had said, in the same voice he used for everything. Low, unhurried, certain. Marcus had not found a reason to stop believing it in the 20 years since his father died. He was on the Eisenhower by 5:30, heading toward the Loop, where a 16-story mixed-use development had been demanding his attention for 11 months. The project was good work, the kind of challenge that required a man to see things others did not bother to look for. He had spent 3 weeks in year 1 of the project arguing with the developers team about a modified joist configuration in the lobby ceiling system that the original design had underspecified. He had won the argument. The building stood correctly because of it. Nobody would ever know the argument had happened, which was, as far as Marcus Ellison was concerned, exactly how it should work. He found the problem on the 4th floor, before 6:30. A load path issue in the revised ceiling plan that 3 junior engineers had signed off on the previous Friday. He stood in front of the structural drawing for 4 full minutes, tracing the beam sequence with 2 fingers the way his father had taught him to read blueprints, slowly, without rushing to conclusion, following the logic until it either held or it did not. It did not. He pulled the orange chalk from his jacket pocket and marked the 3 affected bays with clean, visible strokes. He wrote a note on a yellow square and clipped it to the foreman's clipboard and was already pulling out his phone before the clip was set. Gerald Hook picked up on the second ring. "East Bay on 4, Marcus said. "The revised ceiling plan doesn't account for the HVAC load transfer. They'll need to respec the cross-member before they pour. That's Friday's sign-off." "Missed it." A pause. "I'll call the foreman." "Already marked it. He'll see it." That was how they had always worked. Marcus found the things others missed. Gerald made the calls. Between them, across 11 years, Ellison Hook Structural Consulting had never turned in a report with an uncorrected error and never delivered a project late. Those 2 facts were the foundation on which everything else had been built, and they were not accidents. They were the product of 2 men who believed the work was worth doing correctly, every time, without exception, regardless of how tired they were or how far under deadline they ran. Gerald had been the one who told Marcus, 11 years earlier, that he should be running his own firm. Marcus had said, "Not yet." 2 years later, he said now. They had opened Ellison Hook in a rented office above a dry cleaner in Rogers Park, with 2 laptops, 1 printer, and Lucky. Dana had visited once, the first week, looked around at the folding table and the mismatched chairs, and said, "This is going to work, right?" Marcus had said yes without hesitating, because he could already see the load path. He could see where the weight would go. He just needed enough time to let it travel there. By the 4th year, they had 6 engineers. By the 7th, 10. By the 11th, 14. With a project coordinator named Bev who ran the office with a precision that Marcus respected so completely he had told her twice she could have been an engineer. The acquisition had come from a regional developer out of Indianapolis who had worked with Ellison Hook on 2 contracts and had, Marcus suspected, been watching the firm's structure for longer than he admitted. The offer was specific, detailed, and fair. $4.3 million for a full acquisition of the firm's operating assets, with Marcus and Gerald staying on for a 30-month transition period at principal salaries. The deal had been in due diligence for 4 months and had closed on a Monday morning in a conference room on LaSalle Street, with 2 attorneys, 2 developers, and coffee that nobody touched. Gerald had shaken Marcus's hand in the parking garage afterward. They stood there for a moment looking at each other. "You know what this is?" Gerald said. "It's the structure holding," Marcus said. Gerald laughed. It was exactly the right answer. Marcus had not told Dana the closing date. He had told her they were in negotiations, that much was unavoidable. The due diligence had required schedule adjustments, she had noticed, but he had not told her the specific date. She had not asked. She never asked about the dates that mattered to the firm. She never asked about the trust he and Gerald had established in year 3 to protect the company's operating assets. About the specific mechanics of how the firm's value was held and what happened to it in a legal event. She had asked, once, about 5 years in, whether they were making enough. He had said yes. She said good, and went back to what she was doing. He understood now why she had not pressed further. He got back to the office by 8. He made a second thermos of coffee in the break room. The office thermos, battered stainless steel, Ellison Hook written on masking tape in Gerald's handwriting. There so long it was practically laminated to the metal, and sat at his desk with the Beaumont project file spread across the left half and his laptop open on the right. His phone lit up. A text from Dana. "Flight lands at 4:40. Don't wait up. Conference dinner runs late. Miss you." He texted back a thumbs up and a heart. He meant both of them, in the way a man means things he has said so many times they have become structural, not empty, but load-bearing in a way he could not have described if asked. Dana was a regional director at a pharmaceutical logistics company. She traveled 3 or 4 times a month for regional summits and national alignment conferences. Marcus had attended exactly one company event in 16 years, a holiday party where he had stood in a corner with a glass of wine and watched her work a room with the practiced ease of a woman who was very good at her job. She was. He had always been proud of it, in the uncomplicated way that comes from watching someone pursue something real and get it. He packed her bags when she traveled. He knew how she liked her blazers folded, which pocket she kept her boarding pass in, that she needed a protein bar tucked in the front compartment because she always forgot to eat before boarding and complained about it from the gate. He had never questioned the frequency of the trips. She was good at her job. She had been promoted twice in 4 years. He understood ambition. He had built a firm from filed without acting on, was the gym bag. Black canvas, red zipper. She had bought it 6 months ago. She took it everywhere, even on trips that had no reason to include workout gear. She kept it zipped. She kept it close. One night, when she had left it on the bedroom chair, he had reached for the strap to move it to the floor, and his fingers had registered the weight of something in the interior pocket. A phone-sized weight. He had set the bag back on the chair and not looked further. He was not the kind of man who searched his wife's things. He believed that structures show their failures eventually. The load path always reveals itself. The conference was in Minneapolis. 3 days. She had kissed him at the door Monday morning with the hurry of a woman thinking about her gate, and he had stood in the doorway and watched the car pull out of the driveway and gone inside to make his lunch. He had not planned to pick her up. The surprise was Gerald's idea, offered at lunch on Thursday over a birthday cake Gerald's wife had packed. A real layered cake in a Tupperware container that sat on Marcus's desk like a small, quiet declaration of what a marriage could look like. They talked about nothing important, and then Gerald said, "When's the last time you did something unexpected for her?" Marcus had looked at the cake. He thought about the 16 years. He thought about the way mornings used to feel when they were both early risers and the kitchen was theirs and she would take his coffee without asking and he would pretend to be annoyed and neither of them meant it. He left the office at 3:30. He stopped at the flower stand on Michigan Avenue, the same woman who had sold him anniversary roses for 12 years, who knew his name and always asked after Dana warmly. He bought a dozen, wrapped in brown paper. He drove to O'Hare in late afternoon traffic that would have made another man impatient, and did not bother Marcus at all. He parked in the short-term garage. He did not text. He walked to the arrivals level and found the right terminal, found the right gate corridor, found the rail where passengers came out of the secured area and were visible for the first time. He stood with the roses, and he waited. The flight was 7 minutes early. He almost did not see them at first. The arrivals door opened in waves, business travelers with rolling bags, families with exhausted children, a man in a Cubs jacket carrying a padded case. Marcus was looking for Dana's blue blazer, the one she always wore on conference trips. He saw the blazer. And then he saw the hand. Her left hand, the one with his ring on it, the gold band with the small on Oak Street 16 years ago, was folded inside the hand of a man who walked beside her with the relaxed ease of someone who had decided he was exactly where he belonged. He was tall, gray sport coat, no tie. The kind of jaw Marcus had seen on cologne advertisements. The kind of posture that said nothing had ever required real explanation. He was leaning down slightly, saying something into Dana's ear. Dana was laughing. Not the polite laugh she used at parties. The real one. the one Marcus had not heard directed at him in longer than he could precisely calculate. He stood at the rail with 12 roses in his hand and watched his wife walk through the arrivals door of O'Hare International Airport in the arms of a man she had never once mentioned. He stood there for 11 full seconds. He counted them, because counting was what he did. Loads, tolerances, failure thresholds, seconds, standing at an airport rail, watching 16 years become a different thing than they had been. Then he turned around and walked back toward the elevator. The roses went into a trash can near the elevator bank. He set them in gently, brown paper and all. He did not look back. He sat in the F-150 in the parking structure for 37 minutes with the engine off. The garage was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic outside and the occasional echo of another car working its way down the ramp above him. His thermos was in the cup holder. He did not drink from it. He looked at the concrete column in front of the truck, properly reinforced, built right. The kind of column that transferred load correctly to the footing below. He knew it without measuring it. He was thinking about load paths. Everything had a load path. Forces always traveled somewhere, through the structure, through the connections, through the material, until they found the earth. If the path was built correctly, the structure stood. If you misread a load, if you signed off without looking long enough, the failure was not a question of if, it was a question of when. He had been reading the load in his marriage for 16 years and had never once thought he was misreading it. He picked up his phone and called Gerald. She wasn't alone, he said when Gerald picked up. Long silence. Marcus, I need a name. An attorney, estate and business structure first, not divorce. I need to understand exactly what we locked down in the acquisition before I take any other step. Marcus, are you sure about? I'm an engineer, Gerald. I'm always sure about what I see. He drove home. He went inside. He did not open her drawers or touch the gym bag on the bedroom chair. He set his alarm for 5:12 and closed his eyes. She came home at 11:40 p.m., careful with the door the way she always was when she came in late. She slid into bed in the dark without turning on a light. You awake? She whispered. No, he said. She was asleep in minutes. Marcus lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and did not sleep until 3. Gerald had a name by noon on Friday. Simone Ibarra, family law, formerly federal, LaSalle Street. A reputation Gerald described in exactly 2 words, extremely expensive. Marcus said that was fine. He met her the following Monday at 11 on the 22nd floor of a building he had consulted on 8 years ago. He recognized the lobby ceiling system from the elevator, the modified joist configuration he had argued for with the development team over 3 weeks. He noted it without saying anything. Simone Ibarra was 52, with reading glasses on a chain and a yellow legal pad she wrote on in small, precise letters. She listened without interrupting while Marcus laid out everything. 16 years of marriage, the acquisition that had closed 9 weeks ago, the divorce filing that arrived 48 hours after that closing, and the man at the airport. She filed 2 days after the acquisition closed, Simone said. Correct, but before the disbursement was processed. Correct. Simone circled something on her pad twice. Tell me about the firm's structure. Marcus walked her through it. In year 3 of Ellison Hook, he and Gerald had established a business protection trust on the advice of their original attorney. The firm's operating assets had been held in that trust from the point of its founding, which predated Marcus's marriage to Donna by 18 months. The acquisition proceeds had flowed to the trust at closing. The trust was 12 years old. The documentation was complete, clean, and unambiguous. Simone set her pen down. She looked at him over the glasses she had not yet put on. "Mr. Ellison, did your wife know about the trust?" "No. Did she know the closing date?" He thought carefully. "She knew we were in negotiations. She did not know the closing date." Simone picked her pen back up. Then she filed for divorce, believing the acquisition proceeds were marital property. She said it the way Marcus said load calculations. Flat, exact, and instead, they aren't. She walked away from $4.3 million, Simone said, because she never asked what kind of entity held it. A small pause. "That is the cleanest case I have seen in 11 years of practice, Mr. Ellison." She walked him through the strategy. A response filing disclosing the full trust structure and its 12-year operating history. A motion establishing the trust assets as separate property. A forensic review of marital accounts to identify any improper use of joint funds. And a complete timeline of the acquisition that left no ambiguity about sequencing. "What do you need from me?" Marcus asked. "Everything you have. Trust documents going back to year 3. Firm records from inception. Personal account statements for 4 years. And anything you can tell me about the man at the airport." He pulled a manila folder from his jacket. He had made copies the night before, organized by year, labeled in the same small handwriting he used for site notes. He slid the folder across the table. Simone looked at the folder, then at him. "She's in for a significant surprise," she said. "I imagine so," Marcus said. He stood, adjusted his jacket, shook her hand, and was back on the Eisenhower by 12:30. Dana had not slowed down. The divorce filing arrived at Marcus's office on the Friday after his first meeting with Simone, served by a process server who had asked for him by name in front of the full team. Gerald had come to stand in his office doorway. Marcus had taken the envelope, thanked the server calmly, and read the filing at lunch with the door shut. It was thorough. Her attorney, Hargrove, Simone later told him, known in Chicago family law circles as aggressive and precise, had gone after the firm's operating value as a marital asset, cited Marcus's full compensation history, and included a specific demand for half the projected acquisition proceeds. There was one line Marcus read 3 times. Petitioner he accumulated during the 16 years of the marriage, including but not limited to respondents' business interests. He filed the envelope in the bottom drawer of his desk and went back to the Beaumont project. He had not moved out of the house. There was no motion for exclusive possession in Dana's filing, which told Simone, and therefore Marcus, that Dana had expected him to leave voluntarily once the papers were served. He had not. She began spending nights downtown, at what she described in a text as a friend's place, and Marcus had noted the absence with the same clinical evenness he noted everything. Her mother had called twice. Both calls went to voicemail, not out of anger, but because Marcus had nothing worth saying yet. Her sister had texted, "I'm sorry, Marcus, but you should know she's been unhappy for a long time." He had read it, set his phone face down, and gone back to the seismic calculations on his desk. He knew the man's name was Ryan. He had overheard it on the phone, weeks before the airport, in a voice just low enough to confirm he was not meant to hear. He had not confronted her then, because he was not a man who acted on incomplete information. He needed the full load path before he moved. Now he had it. What Ryan was or what Ryan had was not the structural question. The structural question was what the trust contained, whether it was protected, and whether the documentation was complete enough to withstand a challenge from a competent attorney. The answer to each part of that question was already sitting in a folder on Simone Ibarra's desk on LaSalle Street. Marcus did not think about Ryan further. He thought about work. He drove to the Beaumont site each morning before 6. He marked the foreman's clipboard when he found things that needed correction. He called Gerald. He drove home after 7. He ate the dinner he made for himself at the counter in the kitchen, and washed the single plate and the single fork and put them away in the right places, and went to bed. He was not performing composure. He was not suppressing grief in order to function. He was grieving the way structural engineers grieve, by understanding the load, identifying what had failed, and beginning the work of building something that would hold. He thought about his father. His father had been an ironworker for 31 years. A quiet man who communicated primarily through precision, and who had believed, without ever saying it in words, that a man was what he built, and that what he built was what would outlast him. He had taken Marcus to job sites on Saturdays when Marcus was a boy, not as a lesson, just because he was going and Marcus wanted to come, and there was nothing wrong with a boy learning what work looked like up close. Marcus had watched his father check the plumb on a column with a level and a steady hand, and the kind of certainty that does not need to announce itself. He had watched him mark a mistake with the same calmness he would use to mark a correct measurement, because in his father's world a mistake was just information, not a verdict. Marcus had carried that forward his whole life. A mistake was information. You marked it. You corrected it. You kept building. The marriage had been a load he had misread, not in the early years. In the early years, the marriage was what he believed it was, and what he believed it was had been real. He was certain of that. The miscalculation had happened gradually, at some point when Dana had stopped seeing the structure and started seeing only the picture she had made of it in her head. And he had not caught the divergence because he had been looking at the structure itself, and not the picture she was keeping. He had been building. She had been looking at the surface. He would not make that mistake again, not out of bitterness. Because he was an engineer, and engineers learn from the load. His closest friend outside the firm was a man named Isaiah Banks, who had known Marcus since graduate school and who operated with the specific emotional directness of a person who had never seen a problem he thought silence would fix. Isaiah had heard everything on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the airport, sitting across from Marcus at a kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee between them, and when Marcus finished, Isaiah had set his mug down very carefully and said, "She did what?" "You heard me," Marcus said. "I heard you. I just needed a second to process the size of the mistake she made." "She made more than one." Isaiah looked at him steadily. "You're not going to go over there? You're not going to say anything to this guy?" "What would I say to him?" "I don't know. Something, anything. It has to be done legally and completely," Marcus said. "Anything else just makes noise." Isaiah was quiet for a moment. He picked his mug back up. "You know what you are?" he said. "Tell me. You're the calmest person I've ever been angry on behalf of." Marcus almost smiled. "You should be angry. I don't have time for it right now." Isaiah said he would help with whatever Marcus needed. He came by the house twice in the weeks after to pick up documents and transfer them to a storage unit Marcus had rented in Logan Square, because Simone had advised that keeping all records outside of the process was complete. Isaiah did not ask what was in the folders. He picked them up and took them where Marcus told him to take them, and said nothing that was not useful. He came by a third time, 2 weeks after that, and this time he did not pick anything up. He brought food from the Jamaican place on Devon that Marcus had loved since graduate school, and they ate at the kitchen counter because Marcus had not yet eaten that day, which Isaiah had somehow known without asking. "You need to eat," Isaiah said. "I know. You're doing the thing where you forget." "I know." Isaiah set down his fork. She had the account information. She had the joint statements. She thought she knew what you had. She thought she did. And she filed based on that. 48 hours after the closing. She was watching for it. Isaiah was quiet for a long moment. She had been planning this for a while, he said finally. 8 months, I think. Maybe longer. Marcus picked up his fork. She picked the timing carefully. She just didn't know about the trust. Because she never asked. Because she never asked. Isaiah looked at him. You are the calmest person I have ever been angry on behalf of. You should be angry. I don't have time for it right now. Isaiah finished his food and stayed another hour and talked about nothing important. The way old friends talk, when the important thing has already been said, and what's needed now is the sound of someone familiar in the room. When he left, Marcus stood in the doorway and watched the taillights of his car disappear around the corner and felt, very briefly, the specific shape of what he had. Not what he had lost, what he had. The friends who showed up with food. The firm that it held. The floors in the Lincoln Square house waiting to be restored. The structure of a life built correctly, which was still standing. That was the kind of friend Isaiah had always been. And that was the kind of man Marcus had always been. And neither of those things had changed. The discovery request came from Hargrove in December. 47 pages of documentation requests that covered everything from the firm's founding records to Marcus's personal tax returns for the last 6 years. It was thorough and aggressive, and it arrived, Simone told him, exactly as she had predicted it would. Marcus and Isaiah spent a Saturday morning in the Logan Square storage unit with a portable scanner and a yellow notepad, working through the folder system Marcus had organized in the months since opening Ellison Hook. Everything was there. The founding trust documents from year 3, signed and notarized, dated 18 months before the marriage. 11 years of quarterly trust accounting reports, each one clean and fully separated from the marital estate. The acquisition agreement. The closing documents. The disbursement records. Isaiah ran the scanner. Marcus checked each document against his inventory list and initialed each one when it was done. They worked through the morning without saying much. The storage unit smelled like cardboard and cold air and the faint residual of motor oil from somewhere deeper in the facility. This is a lot of paper, Isaiah said around 11 o'clock. 11 years of a firm, Marcus said. You kept all of it. An engineer keeps his documentation. If you can't show the work, you can't defend the work. Isaiah fed another folder through the scanner. She really thought she had this figured out. She thought she had me figured out, Marcus said. She didn't know what she didn't know. They finished by noon. Marcus delivered the digital drive to Simone on Monday morning. She handed it to Hargrove's office on Tuesday. By Thursday, she had a read receipt confirmed. And then 6 weeks of quiet while Hargrove read through 12 years of clean structural documentation and arrived, one document at a time, at the same conclusion Simone had arrived at in the first 15 minutes of her first meeting with Marcus. There was nothing to work with. The trust was clean. The accounting was clean. The founding date was unambiguous. The acquisition was unambiguous. There was no thread to pull. Hargrove filed no third argument. Simone filed the full response on a Tuesday morning in November. It disclosed the complete trust structure, its 12-year history, the pre-marital founding date, and the full acquisition timeline. It was 47 pages of documentation so clear and so complete that, as Simone said when she called Marcus afterward, there was not a single ambiguity left for Hargrove to work with. By Thursday, Hargrove had requested an urgent attorney conference. Simone reported the content of that call at their next meeting with the efficiency of someone who had run this play before and knew every beat. Her attorney asked if there was any possibility the trust had been established after the marriage. Simone said, I told him the founding date predated the marriage by 18 months. He asked if we had documentation. I told him we had 12 years of it and invited him to request full discovery. And then? He went quiet for several seconds. And then he told me he needed to advise his client of the new information. She paused. There seemed to him when he called to explain the trust structure. Tell me. She said. He never told me about a trust. Marcus was quiet. No, he said. I didn't. Not because he had hidden it. Not because he had calculated, 11 years earlier, that concealment might someday benefit him in a legal proceeding he could not have anticipated. He had not talked about the trust because Dana had never asked about the firm's legal structure. She had never asked how the value was held, what happened to it in various scenarios, what he and Gerald had built inside the legal architecture of Ellison Hook in year 3, when their original attorney had sat them down and told them they needed to protect what they were growing. She had known the firm existed. She had seen the clients and the name on the door and the junior engineers filing in and out of the Rogers Park office. She had been present for the years when he drove a decade-old Honda because the firm needed the capital more than he needed a newer truck. And for the years when the firm grew enough that he bought the F-150 and did not replace it for 8 years after that, because there was no need to. She had stood beside everything he built and had never once asked what held it up. She had no idea, he said, not to Simone, to the window and the city outside it. No, Simone said. She didn't. Dana's position deteriorated the way overloaded structures deteriorate, not all at once, but steadily, one connection failing at a time. Hargrove's second and third arguments, which came in writing 2 weeks after his urgent conference request, were competent and creative, and not quite wrong enough to ignore. He argued that the trust's growth over 11 years of marriage constituted a marital contribution to the corpus. He argued that Marcus's salary during the marriage, salary drawn from the firm and deposited in marital accounts, represented a fungible interest that could not be cleanly separated. Simone addressed both arguments with the same unhurried precision she brought to everything. She countered with documentation of the clean accounting separation that Ellison Hook had maintained since its founding. A separation that had been deliberate and was now, 12 years later, the clearest possible evidence that the trust had never been commingled with marital assets. Hargrove filed no third argument. The formal discovery request arrived in December. It was thorough. Marcus and Isaiah spent a Saturday morning in the storage unit with a portable scanner, creating digital copies of every document in the folder system. Marcus handed the resulting drive to Simone on Monday morning. She handed it to Hargrove's office on Tuesday. By Thursday, she had a read receipt confirmed. Marcus did not hear from Hargrove again for 6 weeks. Simone said that was normal. She said it meant he was reading. Meanwhile, Dana went quiet on the social platforms that Gerald's wife had been monitoring. The rooftop bar photos stopped appearing. The weekend trip to Michigan City was the last one posted. Gerald's wife reported this to Gerald, who reported it to Marcus in the kind of measured second-hand way that said he understood something had changed on the other side, without knowing exactly what. Marcus said, "Thank you," and went back to the Beaumont project. He found one more discrepancy in the revised structural drawings in January, a minor connection detail in the northwest stair tower that the mechanical subcontractor had quietly adjusted without running it through the structural team. He marked it with orange chalk. He called Gerald. He wrote a note for the foreman. He left before the crew arrived. The settlement conference was held on a Wednesday morning in February in a conference room on the 41st floor of a loop building, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a pale birch table long enough to seat 12. Marcus arrived 8 minutes early. He helped Simone arrange documents in precise stacks on their side of the table. He poured 2 glasses of water from the carafe. He wore a dark jacket and a white shirt. No tie. He had not worn a tie since his father's funeral. Donna arrived at 9 with Hargrove, who brought exactly the folders Simone had predicted. Donna sat across the table in a gray suit Marcus had never seen before. She looked composed. She had always been good at looking composed in moments that mattered to her. She did not look at Marcus at first, and then she did, briefly, a look Marcus held steady and level until she dropped her eyes back to the documents in front of her. Hargrove opened calmly and professionally. He acknowledged the trust structure, but argued that 11 years of marital contributions to the firm's operating income represented an equitable interest in the trust's growth. He cited 3 cases. He was organized, credible, and wrong. Simone let him finish before she opened the first folder. She walked Hargrove through 12 years of trust records, clean and unambiguous. The separation between the firm's operating accounts and the marital estate documented at every point with the kind of clarity that comes from work done correctly from the beginning. The trust predated the marriage. Its contributions had flowed from the firm's premarital foundation. The acquisition had moved through it in a way that left no room for ambiguity. Hargrove made 2 more arguments. Simone addressed both without changing her pace. The room was quiet except for the ventilation system running behind the walls, the specific low hum of a building's mechanical systems doing their invisible work. The sound of a structure functioning exactly as designed. At 10:23, Hargrove asked for a recess. Marcus refilled his water glass. He looked out at the Chicago skyline, the familiar vertical grammar of it, the logic of a city built by engineers who understood that a structure built correctly does not fall. He had loved this skyline since he was 12 years old, and his father had taken him to a job site and explained how a column transferred load to the earth. "She's going to take the marital split and withdraw the trust claim," Simone said quietly. "I know," Marcus said. "It's the right move for her." "It is." They came back at 10:38. Hargrove confirmed that his client was withdrawing the claim against the trust assets, accepting division of the identified marital assets, the house equity, the joint savings accounts, the retirement account split, and would not contest the trust structure going forward. Donna was looking at the table. Marcus waited until Hargrove had finished. Then he looked at Donna and held it until she looked up. "I never hid from you," he said. His voice was even and unhurried. "Everything I built in front of you. You just never looked at the blueprint." She held his gaze for 2 seconds. He watched something move through her face. Not recognition exactly. Not regret exactly. Something between the two that had no clean name. Then he straightened his jacket, thanked Simone, nodded to Hargrove, and stood. He did not wait for Dana to respond. He did not watch her face change. He picked up his folder and walked to the door and did not look back at the table. The elevator opened immediately, and he rode it down 41 floors in the quiet company of his own reflection in the polished steel doors. When the lobby doors opened onto LaSalle Street, the February air hit him like a cleared load path, sudden, clean, and complete. He walked to the truck. The aftermath settled in numbers, which was the only language Marcus had ever completely trusted. Donna received that followed. Half the house equity from the sale of the Lincoln Park property, which closed in March at $618,000 and netted her $309,000 after commission. Half of the 2 joint savings accounts totaling $188,000, giving her $94,000. Her portion of the retirement account split, $41,000. Total, $444,000. The number she had entered the settlement conference expecting was $2.55 million. Her assumed half of the acquisition proceeds she had believed were marital property. The number that had made the last 8 months make sense. The number that had justified the gym bag and the deleted messages and the hotel room downtown and the man named Ryan and the laughter through the arrivals door at O'Hare. She walked away with $444,000. Not $1 more. Hargrove filed no appeal. There was nothing to appeal. The trust structure held because it was built to hold, and because Marcus Ellison did not make structural errors. Ryan, as Marcus had suspected without troubling himself to verify, had a different calculation than Dana had understood. He was a regional sales director with a company car and a River North apartment that turned out, upon closer examination, to be a furnished short-term sublet on a month-to-month lease. He had presented himself to Dana as established and successful in the way that certain men do, not through any concrete evidence of substance, but through the accumulated vocabulary of it. The right restaurants, the right ease, the particular confidence of someone who has never been asked to account for himself too precisely. 3 months after the settlement, Ryan's company car was repossessed outside his apartment building on a Tuesday morning. Gerald's wife confirmed this from a source she declined to name. The apartment itself, it emerged, had been listed on a sublet platform since January. Ryan had been month to month since the fall. Well before the settlement conference, well before the outcome was known. He had not been planning a future with Donna. He had been in transit, moving through her life the way water moves through a structure that was not built to contain it, finding the path of least resistance and following it until there was nothing left to take. 4 months after the settlement, Donna's sister texted Marcus. She still had his number and had not quite decided what to do with it. The text said, "He's gone." "I'm sorry, Marcus." He read it, set the phone on the counter, and thought about the gym bag with the red zipper and the weight in the interior pocket and the night he had almost looked inside it and had set it back on the bedroom chair and let the load path reveal itself in its own time. It had. He picked the phone back up and typed, "I'm glad you told me. Take care of yourself." He set the phone down and went back to the floor sander running in the upstairs hallway of the Lincoln Square house. He had been working since 7:30. The hallway floors were nearly done, original white oak, old growth, the kind of material that had been built to outlast the things placed on top of it. He moved the sander slowly and completely along each board, the way he moved through everything, because the result would still be there in 50 years and should be worth looking at. Dana moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Andersonville in April. Her sister reported this to Marcus without being asked, in the same text that said, "She's okay. She's figuring it out." Marcus had replied, "I'm glad," and had meant it. Not because he wanted her to struggle, and not because he wanted her not to. He felt, toward Dana, the specific thing that a man feels when he has finished grieving, and the grief has resolved into something cooler and more permanent. Not anger, not warmth, but a kind of clear understanding of what had been real and what had been a picture, and the knowledge that the picture and the thing were not the same. She had built a picture of who he was and what he had, and she had lived inside it for 16 years, and never once looked up to check if it matched the structure it was supposed to describe. Gerald came by the Lincoln Square house on the last Saturday of March with 2 coffees and spent an hour walking the rooms. He stood for a long time at the built-in bookshelves Marcus had built along the wall to the right of the fireplace, reclaimed oak from a salvage yard in Pilsen, measured twice, cut clean, secured to last. He knocked on the reframed walls. He crouched down and ran a hand across the restored hallway floor. "You did all of this yourself," he said. Not asking. The structural work. I'll hire out the finished trades. That's still a year of Saturdays. I have the Saturdays, Marcus said. Gerald handed him the second coffee, and they stood together in the main room, on the white oak floors, in the particular quiet of a house being made into something. A cardinal landed on the sill outside the original window Marcus had reglazed over 2 December weekends, and regarded them both for a moment, and then was gone. She had no idea what she had, Gerald said. No, Marcus agreed. She didn't. He meant the house. He meant the firm. He meant the man who drove the scratched F-150 and carried the thermos and marked the chalk, and got up at 5 in the morning to go build things that held. She had stood beside all of it for 16 years, and had decided the picture she had was enough without ever looking at the blueprint. He learned later, from Simone, who had heard it from Hargrove in the professional conversation that closes most settled cases, that Dana had asked, once, after the conference room had emptied, why Marcus had never mentioned the trust. Hargrove had relayed the exchange to Simone as a kind of postscript, the way attorneys sometimes note the ironies that are too clean to leave undocumented. Simone told Marcus about it at their final meeting, in the same calm voice she used for everything, with the final paperwork in a neat stack between them on the table. "What did you tell him?" Marcus asked. "I said I had asked you the same question early in the case. You said." "She never asked." Marcus nodded. 16 years, Simone said. "And she never once asked what you were building. She knew I was building something. She just decided the picture she had was enough without looking further. She never asked what held it up." Simone regarded him over the reading glasses she had finally put on. "For what it's worth," she said, "in 11 years of practice, I have never seen a cleaner case. Not because you planned for this outcome. Because you built correctly and kept clean records. The structure held on its own merits. What came after only revealed what was already there." Marcus picked up the final documents, thanked her, and walked out. He drove home to Lincoln Square in the F-150 with a long scratch on the rear panel. He parked in the driveway of the house he was building and cut the engine and sat for a moment in the quiet. Just the tick of the cooling metal and the sounds of the neighborhood arriving at evening. Someone's grill catching 2 houses down. Kids at the end of the street. The particular smell of late March in Chicago. Still cold, but with something loosening at the edges, the city beginning to consider the idea of spring. He got out. He went inside. He left the grief at the door. Not because it was gone, because there was nothing left tonight that required him to carry it standing up. He went downstairs and picked up the sander. He turned it on. The old wood grain came up under his palms, tight and clean, and still good, still worth restoring. The kind of material built to outlast the things placed on top of it. He worked until 8. He made dinner at the counter he had built himself from the reclaimed oak found at the Pilsen salvage yard, measured twice, cut clean, secured to last. He had a project meeting on the Beaumont site at 7 the next morning. He set his alarm for 5:12. He filled the thermos. He laid the Carhartt jacket over the chair by the door. He was, exactly, where he was supposed to be. He did not look back. I hope you enjoyed that one. The next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really